In a busy scene, a young man is confronted by a striking pink-haired girl named Zaitan Chu, who questions why he is there. Meanwhile, her companions are calling her towards a nearby cafe. The young man, Kingsley, is the target of Zaitan Chu's sharp words. He is told to stop standing around and to open the car door quickly. Her backpack is shoved into his hands, and he is scolded for being what she sees as a year-long financial burden on her family. It is suggested to him that he find another job, and he is also told that next time the car should be parked somewhere less noticeable, away from the eyes of their friends. The man stays silent while listening to her words. After Zaitan finishes speaking, she gets into the car and complains about her sister's choice of husband, who is the man. Despite her words, the man stays quiet, starts the car, and drives quickly toward the Chu family's home. Soon, they reach their destination, a large, elegant mansion with several floors. Inside, a man named Manga and a woman are sitting at a tea table, drinking tea. He is thinking about how his life could have been different if he had made other choices in the past. He asks when the woman's daughter will arrive, and the woman replies that her daughter is still working at her job, so she's not sure when she'll get there. This woman is a childhood friend of the man's wife, and there's a hint of disappointment in her voice when she thinks they might not see her. The man then wonders about her fiancé, having heard that he rarely leaves the house. He expresses a wish to meet him, curious about what kind of man could capture the interest of such a beautiful woman. He finds it strange that she even brought her fiancé to her mother's house, as that's not something she usually does. After some time, the man and his companion get back to the house. The girl's mother calls from the second floor, asking him to come downstairs, noting how he usually heads straight to his room as soon as he gets home. The girl adds her voice too, urging him to hurry. It's clear there's some tension in the way she speaks to him. Later, she decides to investigate further, approaching his room cautiously. She gently pushes the door ajar and asks if he now thinks of this place as his home or if he just acts like he owns it. The room is dimly lit, cloaked in darkness. Peeking through the crack in the door, she sees him sitting in his underwear, deep in meditation. Frozen for a moment, she quickly pulls back and runs off, letting out a shriek about seeing him undressed. Definitely not what she wanted to see. Meanwhile, Kingsley stays focused in his meditation, his eyes wide open, fully aware of everything around him. A shimmering blue energy dances in the air, and at one point, he opens his eyes. Between his palms, a swirling mass of plasma flickers, reflecting on the past 10 years. His thoughts fill with a sense of triumph. He finally succeeded. It feels like he spent an eternity working toward this moment, but as he parts his lips to speak, only a series of barks escape his throat. The realization hits him. He hasn't spoken a single word in a decade. His jaw and vocal cords have grown stiff, making even the simplest sounds feel strange and unfamiliar. It's a bizarre feeling, and he knows he'll have to retrain himself to speak. Afterward, hearing his mother-in-law's urgent calls from downstairs, Kingsley hurriedly dresses and leaves the room. At the same time, we see the very plant next to where Kingsley underwent his transformation, now lush with greenery and blossoms. The girl's mother begins a tirade, accusing him of pretending not to hear and questioning his strange behavior. Beside her, the childhood friend of his wife stands with a smirk, clearly unimpressed by the whole scene. Unbothered, Kingsley boldly speaks up, showing no admiration for what the girl had discovered earlier. The childhood friend steps forward and extends his hand to Kingsley, introducing himself with a steady gaze. As Kingsley meets his eyes, the man leans in, whispering that he's heard rumors about Kingsley being mute. He also knows Kingsley had asked to stay at the house. With a confident tone, he calls Kingsley an enigma, claiming he's familiar with such characters. Then he issues a warning, telling Kingsley not to try any tricks, boasting that he's sharp enough to see through any deception. Adding more insult, he implies that Kingsley's proposal to the girl was driven purely by material gain, making him unworthy of her. Throughout this verbal attack, Kingsley remains silent, listening to every word. Finally, the man smugly offers 10,000 to speed up Kingsley's departure. But then, Kingsley grips his hand with such force that the man lets out a scream, his smile twisting into pain. Afterward, Kingsley calmly introduces himself, and both his wife's sister and mother-in-law are stunned. They had believed him to be mute, but here he was, speaking clearly. The other man, equally shocked, demands to know why Kingsley had pretended to be silent when he could speak all along. This situation becomes even more troubling as Kingsley tightens his grip on the man's hand, causing him to cry out in pain again. His mother-in-law quickly steps in, urging Kingsley to let go and end the ordeal. Just then, the girl's phone rings, and she answers with a frustrated tone, only to find out it's the police. They inform her that her sister has been arrested. Kingsley's demeanor shifts instantly, his concern evident as he asks about the situation. The girl explains that her sister is facing issues at work, which led to her being taken into custody. Kingsley's emotions churn with worry and frustration. Without a word, he turns on his heel and storms out. His mother-in-law watches him leave and asks where he's going, suspecting he might be running away from his wife's problems. Meanwhile, another person present questions the girl about Kingsley's sudden departure. She explains that there have been challenges at her workplace, with the police surrounding her office and demanding the arrest of a specific individual. The man reassures her, stating that their family's wealth and connections will quickly resolve the situation and offer help. It's clear the woman has a fondness for him, judging by her behavior. The chaos intensifies as the events are relayed to the Eagle Company's jurisdiction. Suddenly, a fiery-haired woman loudly proclaims that everyone involved will face jail time today. The crowd turns to her, taken aback by the severe allergic reactions visible on her face. She demands millions in compensation for damages and blames the company, further escalating the already tense situation. Kingsley enters the scene, cutting a striking figure. She stands tall, her long purple hair flowing around her as she moves closer to assess the situation. Among the crowd, her sharp eyes catch sight of her mother. With a slight smirk, she remarks that any girl demanding millions must have hit her head, though the injury doesn't seem too serious. Next, there's her childhood friend, a guy who confidently points out that thousands, if not tens of thousands, of women use the company's cosmetics without any issues. So the problem likely isn't with the products. Flashing a grin, he mentions that the city's police chief is an old friend of his, implying that the girl won't have an easy time pushing her claims. Unfazed, the girl with allies reveals her identity, casually dropping the fact that the city mayor is her close relative. Competing with her suddenly seems like an impossible task. The guy, caught off guard along with everyone else, quickly changes his approach, distancing himself from the company entirely. He even goes as far as acknowledging the girl's plight, suggesting that the company might owe her compensation. Before he could continue, Kingsley steps into the scene calmly. He approaches the girl with allergies, asking for just 10 minutes to fix the situation. With confidence, he promises that in that short time, he can restore her face to its former beauty, ensuring there will be no further complaints. Meanwhile, his wife watches in shock, still reeling from the fact that he is speaking. Until now, she had believed him to be mute, and hearing him articulate such clear, rational thoughts left her utterly stunned. To say she was taken aback would be an understatement. Her childhood friend feels disheartened by Kingsley's sudden arrival and boldness, firmly believing that Kingsley's actions will only bring more disgrace to the family. Kingsley's wife, already stressed by the situation, questions his intentions. With everything going wrong, his antics could make things worse. Kingsley calmly reassures her, stating that she doesn't need to worry anymore because he has changed. He declares that from now on he will embody true masculinity. His adversary, however, smirks in disbelief, unimpressed by Kingsley's newfound confidence. To him, words don't define manhood, and he believes Kingsley is still the same despicable person he always was. Others in the room are equally shocked by Kingsley's ability to speak. Many who knew him thought he was incapable of speech, some even regarding him as worthless, perhaps a mere pawn of the Chu family. Undeterred, Kingsley approaches the red-haired girl with blemishes on her face and confidently tells her that he can restore her beauty. The girl, however, isn't immediately reassured by his words, admitting that she's reluctant to trust easily. Kingsley, understanding her hesitation, promises that he will take on all the risks and be fully accountable if things don't go as planned. After a moment, the girl nods in agreement. At that moment, Kingsley's wife rushes over, expressing her concerns about the potential harm to her business. Kingsley, leaning in slightly, tells her that the marks on the girl's face are just regular burns. He then asks his wife to fetch something for him. The red-haired girl, still unsure, asks if he's really confident it will work. Kingsley insists it's necessary and reassures her. His wife hurries off to get what he asked for, while his adversary continues to create obstacles, clearly intent on making things difficult. It becomes clear that despite the tension, Kingsley's wife harbors affection for him. His adversary confides that Kingsley will regret it if his plan fails. Later, Kingsley's wife returns with a bag of ingredients he had requested. She hands it over to him, pleading with him not to endanger her family with this risky endeavor. Kingsley reassures his wife that he won't fail. He knows he's alone in this task, with no one to depend on, and that the outcome rests solely on him. Laying the components on the table, he begins weaving his enchantments over them. The onlookers watch intently, their eyes glued to his every move as he carefully works his magic, explaining each step with precision. Finally, he announces that he's finished. What emerges is a concoction that looks like a murky brown sludge with an unpleasant odor. Odor and wisps of steam rise from the bowl. Kingsley instructs the red-haired girl to apply it to her skin, but she cautions him, warning that any adverse reaction would lead to serious consequences. Despite her hesitation, she complies, dipping a single finger into the mixture to apply it. Suddenly, Kingsley intervenes, plunging his whole hand into the mixture and slapping it onto her face, sending droplets flying everywhere. The girl screams in shock and rushes to the bathroom, much to the amusement of someone in the crowd who lets out a chuckle. Kingsley's wife watches with a mix of disappointment and regret in her eyes, while his opponent grins, satisfied that Kingsley may have made a huge mistake. It seems like everything has gone wrong, until a piercing scream echoes from the women's restroom. Moments later, the same red-haired girl steps out, her skin flawless and radiant, her beauty restored beyond anyone's expectations. Everyone stands in disbelief, none more so than Kingsley's wife's childhood friend, who hurriedly approaches him, eager to know how he pulled off such a miraculous feat. Kingsley, calm and collected, explains that he had studied pharmacodynamics long ago, which gave him the expertise to make this happen. Intrigued, the red-haired girl approaches Kingsley, asking if he could help her with other ailments. Kingsley nods, suggesting he can assist, but emphasizes the need for an examination first. She mentions her wealthy uncle and promises generous gratitude if he can help him. Kingsley agrees, and his wife, listening intently, struggles to understand the situation. She questions Kingsley's sanity, but he brushes it off with a smile, not taking her words to heart. Kingsley's wife tries to dissuade him, pointing out that he isn't a doctor. Treating someone's ailment is one thing, but offering comprehensive treatment is another matter. Kingsley reassures her, telling her not to fret too much. However, the girl begins to grow irritated, accusing him of having an inflated sense of self. She warns that the man might be seriously ill, and there might not be a cure, posing several challenges. Despite his wife's efforts, Kingsley disregards her plea and starts to leave. She tries once more to persuade him, but her attempts prove futile as he departs. He asserts his autonomy and decision, assuring her that his departure poses no threat to her or her family. The scene then shifts to a doctor, who highlights a man's evident distress. He inquires if there is any solution to the issue at hand. The doctor grimly informs him that the mayor's father's condition is worsening rapidly, surpassing their earlier prognosis. Just then, The fiery-haired beauty approaches and Kingsley falls into step beside her. She greets everyone and asks about her uncle's well-being. Upon learning of his deteriorating state, she visibly recoils in shock. Swiftly, she transitions to a solution-oriented mindset, mentioning that she encountered an Oriental medicine specialist earlier who might be able to assist them. The man scrutinizes Kingsley from head to toe, expressing surprise at his claim of being a doctor. The protagonist confirms he is indeed a doctor, but the mayor questions whether he has looked at himself in the mirror, noting that he appears too young. The mayor then requests to see Kingsley's license. Kingsley admits he doesn't have any documentation, which prompts the man to erupt in anger, accusing the girl of bullying him and asserting he won't trust his father's health to a charlatan. The girl apologizes to Kingsley for having to endure the outburst and suggests that he might need to leave. Suddenly, a nurse bursts into the room, urgently calling for assistance and signaling a patient in critical condition. Concern spreads through the corridor as they enter the ward. Kingsley trails behind the young woman and her companion. Inside, a man lies on a stretcher surrounded by medical staff. The mayor implores the doctor to intervene, but in a helpless tone, the doctor conveys the limitations of their abilities in this dire situation. The young woman rushes closer to her companion, seeking solace. She reminds her that she didn't come here alone and that Kingsley can help. However, the mayor doesn't take her words seriously, stating that if a qualified doctor, considered the best in the city, failed, then there's nothing Kingsley can do. Kingsley interjects, asserting that it is possible to help, but there's no need to waste time deliberating. All he hears in response is a demand to get out. Undeterred, Kingsley decides he needs to approach from a different angle. He offers the mayor a deal. If he can help Mr. Johnson, the mayor will issue an apology. If he fails, he could face imprisonment on charges of deception. The mayor erupts in anger, accusing Kingsley of dictating terms. Despite this, the woman insists that Kingsley should probably leave. Kingsley acquiesces, but just as he's about to exit the room, he remarks that he could have assisted Mr. Johnson, leaving them to ponder his words. Outside the ward, his wife waits for him, having evidently trailed him there. She inquires about his satisfaction with the situation and warns him against lingering, advising him to depart swiftly before he attracts serious adversaries. As Kingsley quietly tails her, he is suddenly jolted by a scream emanating from the ward. The ailing man begins to convulse, sending his son into a frenzy. Panic and cries fill the air, while the perplexed doctors struggle to understand the nature of the man's condition. The physician urgently directs a nurse to fetch a pacemaker. Then, the familiar flatline appears on the monitor, accompanied by the heavy silence that follows when the heart ceases its rhythm. The doctor expresses regret, conceding their powerlessness in the face of this tragic situation as the man's heart stops beating. The mayor inquires of the doctor about the cause of the sudden change, noting that just moments before, while the patient's condition was dire, everything had seemed relatively stable. The doctor responds with a somber tone, suggesting that this outcome was inevitable. He emphasizes that there's no need for self-reproach and that acceptance of the situation is key. Such occurrences are part and parcel of life's unpredictability. The man's son rushes to his father's side on the couch, tears streaming down his face as he expresses feelings of unworthiness of his father's love. Just then, the door to the ward bursts open, and Qin Li strides into the room, commanding everyone to clear a path. His determination to save the old man is palpable as he approaches the patient, whose heart has just stopped beating. Placing his hand on the man's chest, Qin Li focuses his energy, creating a visible aura around him. The mayor's skepticism begins to wane as he witnesses a faint bluish glow enveloping Qin Li, a sight truly out of the ordinary. With precision, Qin Li retrieves a specialized needle and methodically inserts it into the man's chest, following up with several more needles, all aimed at the same vital point. It is revealed that a decade prior, a wandering monk had imparted ancient medicinal knowledge to Qin Li, unlocking these remarkable abilities. In exchange for this treatment, silence was his payment for 10 long years. He honored this commitment, and as a result he now possesses extraordinary skills. Inserting another needle into the man's neck prompts sudden convulsions and coughing. The onlookers are stunned. Just moments earlier, the man's heart had ceased beating, and he was nearly deceased. Yet now he begins to cough, and his heart pulses once more. Leaning over the couch, Qin Li takes a deep breath and exhales slowly, remarking that he has managed to intervene just in the nick of time. A bit more delay, and it would have been too late. The doctor stands in shock, taken aback by what he has witnessed. Naturally, he had placed his faith solely in the science of medicine and struggled to regard such matters seriously. The man reclining on the couch begins to stir, lifting himself slightly from the bed. His loved ones erupt in joy, inquiring about his well-being. The girl expresses her deep concern for her uncle, and he gently pats her cheek, acknowledging his folly and urging her not to be angry with him. Qin Li lingers for a few moments, realizing his outsider status amidst the family celebration of their cherished one. As he makes his departure, a sudden sound catches his attention from behind. One is calling his name. Turning swiftly, he finds the mayor kneeling before him. The mayor offers an apology for his previous conduct, acknowledging his inappropriate behavior. Qin Li reassures him, suggesting not to take things too personally and expressing his willingness to assist. He expresses relief at the man's healing and recovery. The red-haired woman also seeks forgiveness from Qin Li and then requests his account details to transfer $500,000 as a token of gratitude for his remarkable intervention. Qin Li exits the room, leaving the group inside to marvel at his expertise. Their voices carry into the corridor, filled with admiration and disbelief. His wife, wearing a discontented expression, remarked on his high demand that day. She expressed her belief that he preferred not to interfere in others' affairs, which took Qin Li back. After all, he had just saved a man's life, literally bringing him back from the brink of death. Meanwhile, around the corner, the childhood friend of Qin Li's wife seethes with anger at his increasing success, clearly intent on stirring up trouble. The scene shifted to the Chu family home, where Qin Li's mother engaged in conversation with his wife, inquiring about her well-being. The wife reassured her that everything was under control, urging her not to fret. Qin Li lingered momentarily before heading toward his room, observing the interaction. His mother-in-law, noticing his presence, instructed him to carry on with his usual chores and not to loiter. The wife, feeling exhausted, mentioned that she could barely stand and intended to retreat to her room for some rest. Complying with the instructions, Qin Li began his cleaning tasks. After completing them, he entered his wife's room to inform her of his progress. To his surprise, he found a young woman in a short, sheer nightgown practicing yoga. It was an unexpected sight that momentarily intrigued him, but he quickly averted his gaze, feeling the heat of embarrassment rise to his cheeks. The young woman noticed him and mentioned that her sister had warned her about someone engaging in inappropriate behavior in the room earlier. Qin Li explained that there had been a misunderstanding. He had merely offered her a ride home from school, changed his clothes upon returning, and accidentally left the door unlocked, allowing her to enter without knocking. Qin Li felt a mix of awkwardness and urgency, eager to clear the misunderstanding while trying to maintain a respectful distance. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, a blend of embarrassment and the awkwardness of the situation. The girl inquired if Qin Li was being truthful. She maintained a series of intriguing yoga poses, fully aware of her short nightgown. He hesitated briefly but ultimately affirmed his honesty. The girl grinned, expressing her trust, citing her sister's notorious temper as assurance that Qin Li wouldn't flirt with her. She later commended him for handling all the day's challenges, declaring him a true gentleman and remarking on his remarkable luck in overcoming every obstacle. Qin Li found himself at a loss for words. The girl initiated a conversation, mentioning plans for a quiet family evening and subtly implying that he was expected to accompany her. Absorbing her words, he pondered for a moment and then agreed. As he prepared to exit the room, the girl collapsed onto the bed, expressing exhaustion and a desire for rest before drifting off to sleep. She thanked him when he inquired why, but received no response. She had already succumbed to slumber. The scene unfolded the following evening as everyone gathered around the table, sharing laughter and engaging in various conversations. A waitress hurried between them, filling glasses with wine. Qin Li took a sip, casting a scrutinizing gaze at one of his relatives, mentally noting to compliment their attire while recognizing the subtle scheming beneath the surface. Soon after, the same relative tactlessly inquired about Qin Li's wife's plans for starting a family. Leaving the young woman visibly flustered, she responded, explaining that they hadn't yet considered such a significant step and felt no rush to do so. However, a family member interjected, insisting they shouldn't postpone such an important matter as time swiftly passes. The conversation took a turn as she shifted her praise to another family member, her son, commending him for his harmonious relationship with his wife, unlike some others in the family. The son playfully chided his mother for laying it on thick, though his impudent smile hinted at his enjoyment of the praise. Subsequently, the conversation revolved around him, with everyone eagerly discussing his life and accomplishments, momentarily diverting attention from the sensitive topic at hand. It emerged that the son held a prominent position, prompting everyone to extol his virtues, occasionally drawing comparisons with the main character, sometimes subtly and other times more overtly. The cherry on top was when this gentleman presented a special gift to the head of the household. He produced a petite crimson box and approached the man with it. Upon opening it, the recipient's expression clearly reflected his admiration for the contents nestled inside, a delicate porcelain bowl dating back to the Yuan dynasty. The gentleman mentioned that he had caught wind of the head of the household's appreciation for fine porcelain, which led him to acquire this bowl for a staggering 30,000. He further remarked that when it comes to honoring good people and crafting meaningful gifts, he doesn't hesitate to invest such a sum. For the next 10 minutes, the room buzzed with chatter about the lavishness of the gift and the commendable character of the giver. Qin Li observed quietly, his thoughts diverging sharply from the general sentiment. To him, Chang Hang's penchant for extravagance seemed frivolous. He regarded the bowl as utterly devoid of value, finding the 30,000 price tag absurd. Activating his mystical vision, Qin Li discerned that the item was nothing more than a meticulously crafted replica. Chang Hang turned to him, extending an invitation to inspect the bowl. Seizing the opportunity, Qin Li inquired if he could identify its true nature. Chang Hang then proceeded to openly insult him, boasting without restraint. The final straw came when Chang Hang audaciously offered to assist the protagonist in securing a job as a janitor. Following this, Qin Li's wife could no longer contain her frustration. She forcefully banged her glass on the table, causing few drops of wine to splatter onto the tablecloth. "Enough of this circus," she demanded, reminding everyone present that Qin Li was also a member of the family, deserving of respect and free from insult. Chang Hang retorted that Qin Li had arrived empty-handed, which prompted the protagonist to rise to his feet. "I admit that I came empty-handed today," he began, aware that the relative still remained oblivious to Qin Li's ability to speak. Thus, their astonishment was palpable. Simultaneously, Chang Hang's wife remarked that he was still a scoundrel, albeit now a vocal one. Qin Li shrugged off the insults, stating that they held no sway over the fact that they had been lavishing praise on a counterfeit for over 10 minutes. The room fell silent as the realization began to dawn on those present, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere as they grappled with the implications of their misplaced admiration. These words stoked the ire of the relatives, and Chang Hang, recalling that he had paid 30,000 rubles for the bowl, vehemently denied any possibility of it being fake. "You can't just call it nonsense after I paid that much," he shouted, his voice rising. Qin Li retorted, forking over 30,000 for nonsense. is sheer foolishness. That's hardly something to boast about. Fury boiled over at the remark, his hands crashing down onto the table with such force that dishes and cutlery scattered in all directions. Qin Li stood firm, vowing to substantiate his claim. "I'm not one to merely talk the talk," he asserted, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. However, the head of the household stepped in, putting an end to the spectacle. "Enough, protagonist. Hold your tongue," he commanded, his authority attempting to restore order. The rest of the room, including Qin Li's spouse, voiced their discontent. His wife defended her son-in-law, asserting his noble intentions, and insisting that even if he had been duped, it bore no significance in the grand scheme of things. Suddenly, an unexpected visitor entered the establishment. None other than the mayor, accompanied by a friend. Word had spread about the forgery, prompting the mayor's curiosity. His presence took everyone by surprise, and the protagonist's son-in-law hurriedly approached, ingratiating himself before the mayor and offering to introduce him to the other guests. However, the mayor diverted his attention, moving toward the protagonist. "Thank you truly," he expressed with sincere gratitude. "I cannot adequately convey my appreciation." Qin Li dismissed any further discussion, asserting, "There are no outstanding debts among us." His son-in-law was taken aback, questioning if there was a misunderstanding. He attempted to convey Qin Li's unsavory character, but the mayor reacted strongly. "The true scoundrel here is Qin Wang," he declared, turning his focus back to Qin Li. The protagonist shrugged it off, stating, "They're merely my wife's relatives. There's nothing more to discuss." He gestured toward the ancient bowl, the source of their disagreement, its presence looming large in the conversation. It was as if the bowl itself had become a battleground for pride and reputation, and all eyes fell upon it, awaiting the next move in this escalating drama. The mayor confidently declared the bowl as not being from the Un dynasty. Fortunately, he had someone knowledgeable by his side, an expert who specialized in artifacts from this era. He requested the expert to examine the bowl, knowing that porcelain and pottery were their forte. As the inspection commenced, the expert examined the artifact closely and opined that the bowl appeared authentic, much to the delight of Chang Hang. However, Qin Li, seeking certainty, questioned the expert's confidence in its genuineness, provoking a hint of annoyance in response. "I stand firm in my belief that it's not real," Qin Li declared, his tone unwavering. The expert, attempting to maintain his composure, patted Chang Hang on the shoulder and remarked, "Now I understand what you find so appealing about this individual." But the expert quickly pointed out unequivocally that it was indeed a forgery. "There's always a small stamp from that era," he explained, peering closely at the bowl. "Moreover, the patterns were exclusively applied by hand back then, a detail you can observe in true pieces." He gestured to the bowl, stating, "This particular item is an unmistakable counterfeit, albeit of decent quality. It was likely tossed into a tomb." He then mentioned that such items often bore a mark of death, which he managed to locate on this piece. The atmosphere shifted as the guests grew louder, tension rising in the room. Chang Hang's mother erupted in a tirade directed at him, but he attempted to diffuse the tension, his frustration evident. The expert, sensing the shift in mood, warmly embraced Qin Li, praising his keen eye for recognizing the replica amidst the high-quality antiquated craft. "Your perception is astute," he commended. The mayor, eager to seize this serendipitous encounter, offered his hospitality, expressing it as an honor to engage in conversation with Qin Li. "I would be delighted to dine with you," he said, extending the invitation. Unable to let such an opportunity slip by, Qin Li informed his wife's relatives that he had an engagement with the mayor for dinner and would return promptly. Their reaction was one of astonishment. Many perceived him as lacking stature, and the women began to question the image they had formed of him. Left alone with his thoughts, Qin Li brooded over the concerns of the world. A fellow guest confided in him, revealing that another wave of misfortune had befallen their family. Both my family and I are deteriorating, he said, his voice heavy with worry. Despite undergoing extensive medical examinations and tests that show no apparent cause for our declining health. Curious, Qin Li inquired if he could assess the man's pulse. The man consented, and Qin Li placed his hand on the man's wrist, focusing intently. After a moment of contemplation, he appeared deep in thought. "What do you find?" the man asked, his curiosity piqued. Qin Li explained after your family dinner, "You ought to prioritize a visit to the mayor. It would be wise to adjust any existing plans accordingly." Expressing gratitude, the man indicated his intention to await Qin Li's return at his residence, displaying confidence in a favorable outcome. "I'll take your advice to heart," he said, a glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. The scene concluded with Qin Li assisting the head of his wife's family into the car, a gesture that perhaps indicated an overextension of his involvement. To understate it, Qin Li's delay was more than just a little. After ushering the man into the back seat, he announced that everyone else would leave, claiming he still had unfinished business. Stepping aside slightly, he pulled out his phone to map out his next move. The navigator dutifully began directing him as Qin Li traversed a nearby alley. Suddenly, he unexpectedly encountered his wife's childhood friend, accompanied by a group of armed individuals. Qin Li regarded them with stoic silence. His adversary wasted no time launching into an offensive tirade. "You're the root of all trouble, Qin Li. Just look at the 2 previous accidents. Those are your doing," he accused. "This behavior," he insisted, "warranted a lesson." Qin Li calmly explained, "At first I didn't recognize you and mistook you for a bug, which explains the sudden foul smell." His sarcasm didn't go unnoticed. The adversary, visibly angered, instructed his cohorts to assault the protagonist with swift precision. Qin Li deftly countered, distributing justice with his fists. Amid the chaos, bones shattered, limbs were injured, and jaws hung agape, testament to Qin Li's mastery in combat. He approached the largest man, who lay unconscious on the ground wielding a baseball bat. Placing his foot on the man's chest, he remarked, "You really didn't bring enough backup, did you?" The sight left his adversary astounded. Initially dismissing Qin Li as a mere troublemaker, he now witnessed him fight with the skill of a true ninja. Turning towards him, Qin Li derisively called him a mutt and beckoned him closer. All he received in response was a hasty retreat. Realizing the skirmish was becoming a diversion from his main objective, Qin Li sighed, aware that he was merely squandering time. Yet he also recognized that the mayor's residence was just around the corner. After a brief search, he succeeded in locating the mayor. He approached the inner common area and pushed the button, a distinct ringing echoing through the air. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing the mayor, who greeted him at the threshold. "We've been anticipating your arrival," he said, extending an invitation as he ushered Qin Li inside. As Qin Li entered, he sensed an atmosphere thick with tension. Abruptly, a voice erupted from an adjacent room, causing the mayor's expression to shift. Concerned, he hastened towards the source. "What's going on?" he inquired of his wife. She relayed the troubling news, her voice strained. "The infant has fallen ill once more, and now even lay people are observing a dark aura enveloping the child." It was apparent that sinister forces were at play, and Qin Li's instincts screamed that this was no ordinary illness. Qin Li entered the chamber to find the child suspended in the air, wailing incessantly, while a malevolent presence loomed ominously overhead. Urged by the family patriarch, he sprang into action, reassuring everyone that there was no cause for alarm and vowing to take charge of the situation. The malevolent force inhabiting the child's form bellowed at Qin Li to retreat, but he stood firm, unwavering in his resolve. Extending his hand toward both the demon and the child, he invoked his power. A brilliant flash illuminated the room, and moments later the child collapsed onto the bed. The toddler's parents began to panic, but Qin Li halted them, cautioning that more was yet to unfold. The child's mother grew irate, chastising her husband for inviting a stranger into their home. Remaining skeptical of Qin Li's abilities, her husband hushed her, acknowledging the urgency of the situation with grim determination. Qin Li noted the severity of the circumstances, realizing that time was slipping away. He inserted a needle into the child's forehead while clutching a radiant azure orb of energy in his other hand. Once more, the sinister presence loomed over the boy, then ascended higher into the air before dissipating into nothingness. As the child regained consciousness, he called out for his mother, who rushed to his side, exclaiming his name and enveloping him in her arms. Qin Li reassured her that it was all over now, and that the worst had passed. Yet simultaneously, his curiosity was piqued, driving him to seek the origin of such malevolent force. He lowered himself to the floor, peering beneath the bed while inquiring if anything new had been introduced into the household. The father asserted that there was nothing unusual, merely some stone lions that had been placed recently near the entrance of their home. This piqued Qin Li's interest further, and he decided to investigate outside. As he approached the stone lions, he studied them carefully, searching for any sign of dark energy. His instincts urged him that something was amiss. Suddenly, he noticed a small purple pebble nestled within the mouth of one statue. Carefully, he plucked it out and scrutinized it, feeling an unsettling energy radiating from it. His mind raced as he realized this tiny object could be the source of the troubles plaguing the family. Just then, another individual approached, questioning whether all the troubles truly stemmed from this insignificant stone. Qin Li nodded in affirmation, detailing the sequence of events and explaining how this seemingly innocuous pebble had wreaked havoc on their lives. With a decisive motion, he crumpled the pebble into tiny fragments, releasing a burst of dark energy that dissipated into the air. As the mayor's wife emerged from the house, she expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Qin Li for his assistance. He replied graciously, stating he was pleased to be of service. The mayor, marveling at their Qin Li felt lucky to have encountered such a helpful individual. The mayor offered to discuss the possibility of Qin Li opening a clinic in the town, an unexpected but intriguing opportunity for him. Feeling a mix of surprise and interest, Qin Li accepted the mayor's offer, grateful for the chance to establish himself further in the community. Later, in a dark car speeding through the night, Qin Li sat in the back seat, thinking about owning his own clinic and how proud his parents would be if he succeeded. Suddenly, he saw something outside and quickly asked the driver to stop. The sudden stop pushed Qin Li's face against the front seat. The driver, concerned, asked what was wrong. It turned out that Qin Li saw his wife on the street and wondered where she was going so late at night. She stood elegantly, dressed nicely, and was looking around carefully. The driver noticed Qin Li's wife and complimented him on his good choice, saying the girl was very beautiful. Qin Li was waiting for someone. A few seconds later, a casual girl in a leather outfit with a short, bright haircut approached her. Qin Li thought she must be his wife's friend and felt a bit nervous, but he thought there was nothing wrong with that. His feelings changed when he saw the girls kiss each other. Not only was Qin Li shocked, but so was the driver, who even pulled out his phone to take a picture. Qin Li didn't understand what was happening and realized that his wife was a lesbian, something he had never suspected. The girls entered a club, and Qin Li sat sadly, watching them. The driver continued to admire the beauty of Qin Li's wife. Then, Qin Li noticed that his wife's friend made a small hand gesture, but it wasn't clear what it meant. Once inside the club, the girlfriend asked Qin Li's wife to drink something stronger, and they started to whisper. The young lady sat at the bar and began to talk. The bartender made some cocktails for them as they settled in. A girl dressed casually said this wasn't the place for serious talks. A nightclub was for having fun. Qin Li agreed, and his wife said she didn't plan to go home sober that night, so they started to drink. As the night went on, Qin Li's wife found herself feeling pleasantly tipsy. She appreciated her friend's understanding and started to share about the pressure from her family to get married. Her friend listened kindly and called her a gem and a precious pearl, using sweet words throughout their conversation. It seemed like Qin Li's wife's friend kept encouraging her to drink more, and it looked like Qin Li was the only one who noticed. It was possible that her friend had put something in her drink. Eventually, the girl started to lose her balance and began to fade into unconsciousness. Her so-called friend helped her upstairs to a room with a big bed and a video camera nearby. Qin Li's wife was placed on the bed in a dazed state. The man went to the door and locked it tightly, and his intention seemed very bad. He moved closer to the woman and lightly brushed her leg before leaning over her with a creepy smile. He had liked her for a long time and had begged her not to marry Qin Li, but she hadn't listened. Feeling determined, he started to take off her clothes, not knowing that the camera was recording everything. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, interrupting his plans and making him very angry. A woman's voice outside mentioned a gift, which surprised him. He thought it was the same casual girl trying to make some extra money. Curious, he opened the door and was shocked to see Qin Li standing there. "Damn it," he exclaimed, startled. Neither of them expected to see each other. Qin Li looked at his wife on the bed, and the man tried to make excuses, saying things weren't what they seemed. But Qin Li ignored his weak attempts and pulled him inside, sending him flying a few meters away, blood trickling from his mouth. As Qin Li approached, he asked the man how he wanted to die. The scene changed when the boy dropped to his knees and begged Qin Li for mercy, promising to disappear from his life forever. Moved by compassion, Qin Li told him to leave and never come back. But then the boy suddenly attacked, pulling out a knife. Qin Li quickly grabbed his wrist and warned him that being lenient had its limits. With precise movement, he struck a weak spot on the boy, causing him to fall to the floor in pain. Afterward, Qin Li felt relieved that everything had turned out okay. His wife had really avoided a terrible situation, although she had faced great misfortune. Now, luck was on her side. Qin Li approached her and used his skills to gently produce a needle. He gave the girl a small prick on her arm, and she let out a sigh. Qin Li explained that she would gradually start to wake up. True to his words, after a few moments, the girl began to move, her eyes fluttering open. Qin Li asked how she was feeling, and she repeated his question. But then her eyes widened as she looked around, and suddenly her expression changed to anger. She quickly sat up and slapped Qin Li across the face, shouting, "You vile brute!" Qin Li was shocked by her reaction and tried to explain that he had rescued her, thinking she was just confused. However, the girl started screaming, convinced that Qin Li was the one who had hurt her. As he stood up calmly and walked out of the room, she continued to shout that he was a liar. Qin Li insisted that he was innocent and that he had helped her, but it was up to her to decide if she wanted to believe him. In response, she called him a deceitful scoundrel and threw a pillow at him, showing her distrust. After Qin Li left, the girl started to cry as she realized something. She noticed a camera nearby, a reminder that it had recorded everything, leaving no doubt about what had happened. Now, we find ourselves on a busy street where Qin Li is sitting, lost in thought. Suddenly, his phone rings, breaking the silence. He answers quickly and hears Mrs. Li on the other end. She asks if Mr. Qin Li is available and then smoothly changes the subject, remembering a powerful cream he had once recommended. Mrs. Li expresses how happy she is with the results, stating that it changed her skin's texture. She wants to buy more of the amazing product and asks for his help. Qin Li asks how much she needs, and she assures him that she will need 2 jars. When he returns home, she offers him 2 million for them. Qin Li agrees, but notes that the price is quite low. Mrs. Li laughs and tells him not to turn down money in the future. She also says she is willing to help sponsor him after hearing about the clinic opening. Qin Li chuckled and thanked Li Yang for her kindness. The scene then shifted to Qin Li's wife's room. An old war clock struck exactly 1:00 in the morning, and and the gentle glow of the moon illuminated the room. A young woman lay on the couch, clutching a pillow tightly as sadness consumed her. She couldn't sleep because she had seen the footage on the camera and now knew the truth. She felt responsible and blamed herself for what had happened. She imagined Qin Li's anger directed at her while her thoughts raced. Just then, Qin Li entered the room and asked why she was upset. He explained that he had been busy with other things. The young woman expressed her disappointment at his sudden disappearance without telling her. Qin Li looked at her meaningfully, which made her stumble over her words, clearly struggling to apologize. Sensing her difficulty, Qin Li suggested that her actions were understandable. The conversation shifted when the young woman started to worry about losing her job, looking very distressed. She then began talking about Li Wan and how often he interacted with her. Thinking this might lead to her getting fired, Qin Li asked what the connection was between them. She replied that it was a direct link. About her job, who would support the family. Finding a new job wouldn't be easy. Qin Li moved to the sofa across from her and sat down. He reminded her of how he had recently helped an elderly man, which led to the mayor offering to help him open his clinic. This showed that he had good earning potential because of his healing skills. His wife could easily join him in his work and help out, so there was no reason to worry. At first, the woman didn't fully trust Qin Li's reassurances, thinking he was just trying to comfort her. Without waiting for her response, he stood up and started going up the stairs, mentioning that the clinic would open soon. The woman had to think carefully about Qin Li's offers. She stayed silent, watching him as he walked away, wondering how much he might have changed in just a few days. Guilt still lingered in her heart. Meanwhile, at the Chu family's house, a girl kept ringing the doorbell and knocking loudly. Qin Li woke up and slowly walked to the door to see what was happening. When he opened it, he found a classmate of both him and Kanan, along with her best friend. She urged Qin Li to stop standing there like a statue and to let them inside. It seemed she had started to come over on her own, and it was clear that she found it funny that her friends had married someone like him. Qin Li remembered how hard it had been to deal with her the last time they went out together. Their guests started calling her friend and mentioned that they were going out shopping and then somewhere else. Meanwhile, a car zoomed over the bridge, blasting loud music. Qin Li was driving and his wife and her old friend were in the back seat discussing their plans for the day. The car stopped, and the girlfriend of Qin Li's wife jumped out shouting, "We're here." They had arrived at an exclusive auction that was hard to get into. As they approached the entrance, they met a serious-looking security guard. The girlfriend confidently showed her pass and mentioned that their driver was part of their group. Inside, they stepped into an elevator, and when the doors opened, they found themselves in a grand room filled with excitement, where a secret gem auction was taking place. Qin Li looked around, taking in the scene. A friend of his wife mentioned that the city's elite had gathered there and said Qin Li might find a great gem for his wife. He agreed, seeing the value in her suggestion. The host began announcing details about the next item for auction, a unique hermit stone. The crowd buzzed with excitement, and everyone started placing their bids. As the excitement grew, Qin Li's attention was drawn to a large box of stones. He focused on one particular cobblestone that seemed to have a strange energy coming from it, resonating with something deep inside him. While the host continued to talk about the hermit stone, the girls were caught up in discussing how amazing it would be to get it. Suddenly, they realized Qin Li was missing. He had gone to one of the owl workers to ask about buying one of the stones. He was holding a simple cobblestone, something that was just lying around and worth no more than 100. Qin Li explained that he only had a little extra money after buying a gemstone and asked for help cutting it. The girls found him, and one of them joked that even a pig could find something valuable in the trash. She had also heard that Qin Li was planning to start his own hospital, so his actions seemed strange. Usually, the real jewels were sold secretly. When the stone was cut, the worker went wild. Hidden inside the plain stone was a massive emerald. Everyone, including Qin Li's companions, was shocked. Soon, all the guests gathered around, staring at the gem in disbelief. They couldn't believe something so valuable had come from such a simple stone. Enthralled by its beauty, many people wanted to buy it. A girl quickly offered Qin Li 30,000 for it, along with a bonus. Then a man with a strange mustache raised the bid to 50,000 and even offered any girl as an extra reward. Shortly after, a rich man raised the bid to 5 million. People called him Tan, the same man who was the father of Qin Li's wife's friend. He repeated his offer of 5 million for the stone and asked if Qin Li was ready to accept. Qin Li said the decision to sell the stone was up to his wife, as it was meant for her. He pointed to her, and she was surprised by this but agreed to sell, especially since a rich and important person was interested. The man laughed and said that writing the check was just a small formality. He then walked over to Qin Li and asked how he was so good at finding hidden gems in plain rocks. Qin Li admitted that the stone looked just like any other at first glance, which made the discovery surprising. When asked why he picked that stone, Qin Li didn't want to explain. Mr. Tan respected his decision to stay quiet and said the stone now belonged to him. A friend of Qin Li's wife mentioned that it was the first time something's value had jumped so high at a blind auction. Suddenly, people began whispering that the nugget had split in two, making it almost worthless. The man who bought it just laughed and felt like he had been proven right. He wasn't upset and even invited Qin Li to join him in the jewelry business. Qin Li didn't know what to say, so the man told him not to rush and think carefully. Then he left with his daughter, following behind and asking why he bought the stone, especially since he seemed to know something would go wrong. He just chuckled. As Qin Li drove down the road with his wife beside him, she asked what he had been doing at the auction. He said he had been reading books about gemstones. He handed her a check, but she pushed it away, accusing him again of being unfaithful. Memories flooded back, reminding her of how he had pretended to be mute for 10 years. Qin Li, unsure of what to say, felt the heavy weight of their shared past. Flashbacks revealed a key moment when Qin Li had met a wandering monk who had given him important knowledge. Qin Li, hesitant to share all the details with his wife, firmly asserted that he hadn't deceived her for the past decade. He explained that he truly couldn't speak during that time, which was news to her. Unsurprisingly, she reacted with disbelief and asked why he had even married her. Qin Li responded, somewhat distant, saying he had forgotten the exact reasons but not their past. Flashbacks then revealed a time when Qin Li was being bullied and his future wife had stood up for him. As she thought back on those memories, Qin Li asked if she remembered suggesting they get married after graduating from university. He had been excited at the time, but he always knew their marriage was more of a facade. Something for show. Confused, she asked why he had grown to resent her so much. Qin Li brushed off the question, insisting that her family had never done anything to harm him and that her behavior had always been admirable. Despite the marriage being superficial, he had still considered her his wife. She, overwhelmed with thoughts, put her hands on her head, lost in her own memories. The silence was awkward, so Qin Li shifted the conversation. He mentioned the opening of his clinic, inviting her to attend. She seemed doubtful, asking if he was serious about the clinic, especially given the difficulties in healing. Qin Li reassured her, stating that healing was his life's purpose and that he was confident in his abilities. However, she warned him about the risks. If he failed, the consequences would be severe, and he would have to bear the responsibility alone. Qin Li nodded in understanding, sensing that despite her harsh words, she still cared about his well-being. The scene then shifted to the grand opening of the treatment center named Yin and Yang. Fireworks lit up the sky and a crowd had gathered, clearly excited by the event. It was obvious that this opening was connected to Qin Li's clinic. At a nearby table, a couple engaged in a tense conversation filled with animosity, discussing Qin Li. His father-in-law, seated nearby, reassured everyone not to worry about Qin Li, pointing out his hidden talents, like recently saving the mayor's family. He took the opportunity to boast a little about his son-in-law's capabilities, casually mentioning that the clinic was a gift from the mayor Qin Li remained composed, though a man named Chen Hang, notorious for his past troubles, approached him with the intent to cause trouble. Chen Hang, known for his mischief with a counterfeit bowl, made some snide remarks to sour Qin Li's mood. When Chen mentioned that Qin Li's clinic was situated within his department, it was clear there was an underlying threat, implying potential trouble ahead for Qin Li. The city's mayor and the striking red-haired woman, both prominent figures, congratulated Qin Li on his breakthrough, presenting him with gifts in honor of his achievements. Their unexpected appearance left the guests in awe, especially Qin Li's envious relative, who had long been vying against him. Qin Li welcomed them graciously, urging them to come inside and join the festivities. However, his wife, visibly frustrated with his reluctance to share more about his success, remained silent. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed from the street, interrupting the celebration. A cry for help that sent a chill through the gathering. It turned out that a young man had collapsed, and his father's desperate pleas for aid filled the air. Without hesitation, Qin Li rushed through the crowd, making his way to the man and assessing the situation with calm precision. While some onlookers suggested immediate hospitalization, Qin Li reassured them that he could help, urging everyone to remain calm as they brought the boy indoors. Once inside, the boy lay unconscious on the couch, his father kneeling beside him, racked with worry. Qin Li, focused and methodical, began his examination, quickly determining that the boy had been poisoned. His stomach was filled with dangerous toxins. He gently asked the father if he knew what the boy might have consumed. The father hesitated, clearly overwhelmed by his circumstances, and explained that his neighbor often helped watch the boy as he was frequently occupied with work after the passing of his wife. Qin Li, sensitive to the man's deep grief and exhaustion, could feel an oppressive darkness surrounding him, a weight of despair that had taken root. As Qin Li worked, a sudden commotion erupted. Several people barged into the room, accusing him of being a fraud, a quack with no credentials to practice medicine legally. They insisted that the boy be taken to a proper clinic where modern medical professionals could treat him. The Chu family representatives, including Qin Li's wife, seemed to agree, advocating for more conventional care. The boy's father, overcome with distress, glared at Qin Li, calling him a charlatan. Qin Li remained calm, but the urgency of the situation was clear. He tried reasoning with the father, explaining that there was no time to waste. The boy needed help now. As tensions mounted and the child's coughing grew more severe, Qin Li took command of the situation. He instructed the onlookers to clear a path, then swiftly produced a set of acupuncture needles. Ignoring the hostile atmosphere, he expertly inserted the needles into the boy's energy centers, concentrating on restoring balance to his body. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Qin Li's hands moved with it. Precision, every motion measured and deliberate. A few moments later, the young man regurgitated, releasing the toxins from his body. Almost immediately, a sense of relief washed over him, and he could breathe freely again. His father, overcome with emotion, rushed over to embrace him tightly. The boy, still a bit dazed, mentioned he was hungry, and his father, clearly overjoyed, chuckled and suggested they go grab something to eat. Qin Li, wiping his hands, calmly informed them that while the acute symptoms had passed, it would be wise to visit a medical facility for further tests to identify the poison's source. The father, overwhelmed with gratitude, began praising Qin Li, calling him a divine healer. The mood in the room shifted, and where there had once been doubt and skepticism, the crowd now murmured in agreement, acknowledging that perhaps Qin Li truly was a healer, not a charlatan as some had claimed. People began to express their satisfaction, admiration growing for the man who had just saved the boy's life. However, just around the corner, hidden from view, stood a figure silently fuming with frustration. His clenched fist struck the wall in anger. This figure was none other than the childhood friend of Qin Li's wife, consumed by jealousy. It was, in fact, this very man who had poisoned the child in a twisted plot to discredit Qin Li. But now, watching Kingsley save the boy, his plan had failed. Beside him sat an elderly man offering him calming advice. "Patience," he said in a low, gravelly voice. "Everything happens when the time is right." As evening fell, the tension from the day still clung to the air, though Kingsley remained hard at work, tirelessly treating a stream of patients that seemed never-ending. As the sun dipped below the horizon, signaling the end of a grueling day, his attention was suddenly drawn to an odd sight. A young girl perched in a tree, dressed in attire reminiscent of a ninja, with a stained knife in hand. Her intense gaze met his as she leapt down in front of him. Her stance was aggressive. Cautiously, Kingsley inquired about her intentions. The girl eyed him suspiciously before demanding to know who he was. Kingsley, calm despite her threatening demeanor, assured her that he was the local doctor. Kingsley urged the girl to cease her advance, but before she could reach him, she collapsed unconscious on the ground. Rushing to her side, he quickly assessed that she was in dire need of assistance. Despite his exhaustion, it appeared his workday wasn't over yet. Gently lifting her into his arms, he carried the unconscious girl to his clinic, carefully laying her down on a nearby couch. As he tended to her, his phone rang. Her voice was tinged with frustration as she asked why he hadn't returned home yet. Thinking fast, Kingsley explained that an unexpected patient had come in and that he might need to stay at the clinic overnight. His wife, unimpressed, sarcastically suggested he might as well move into the clinic if he was going to spend so much time there. Kingsley knew he'd have to smooth things over later, perhaps with a thoughtful gift to appease her. Turning his attention back to the unconscious girl, he carefully cut away her tattered clothing with a pair of scissors to examine her injuries. As he removed her pendant, he realized it wasn't an ordinary piece of jewelry. It was an army dog tag. Engraved on it was the designation 19th Special Forces Detachment. Startled, Kingsley pondered how such a young girl had come to possess a tag belonging to an elite military unit. The 19th Special Forces, he knew, were no ordinary soldiers. They were handpicked for their skills, capable of handling the most dangerous and impossible missions. Just as he mulled over this revelation, the girl began to stir, slowly waking up. She blinked in confusion, her memories foggy, unsure of how she had survived. When her eyes focused on Kingsley, she asked if he had been the one to rescue her. He nodded, confirming that he had just barely managed to save her in time. A few more minutes, and it might have been too late, he added. The girl, still weak, struggled to sit up but eventually managed to stand on shaky legs. Kingsley, concerned, asked her about her plans. She admitted that she had nowhere to go, no home, and no idea of what to do next. Kingsley looked at her thoughtfully, then offered an alternative. "You don't have to be on your own," he said, stepping toward the window and drawing back the curtains to let sunlight flood the room. "I'm actually looking for an assistant, and I think you'd be perfect for the job." Surprised, she looked at him skeptically, unsure if he was serious. "You mean it?" she asked, her voice uncertain but hopeful. Kingsley smiled and nodded. "Absolutely." "What do you say?" He affirmed the sincerity of the proposal, assuring her of a monthly salary. "While it may not be a fortune, it would suffice for living expenses." Her astonishment grew at his rescue and subsequent care. It was evident he genuinely desired to aid her. She acknowledged that if he saved her, she now owed him her life. If her assistance could be of value to him, she was prepared to fulfill whatever tasks he required. Kingsley mentioned that he already had one favor to ask. She needed to return to the ward as she hadn't fully recovered yet. Just then, the doorbell rang. Kingsley opened it to find his wife's friend standing there with a sense of urgency. "On behalf of the Tang family, I officially invite you to participate in the prestigious Jasper Games," she announced with a grin. Taking the invitation in hand, Kingsley began to mutter something about not being prepared, but before he could finish, the friend grabbed his arm and pulled him along, determined to make sure he attended. The scene shifted to the bustling venue of the blind gem auction, a place filled with excitement and anticipation. Kingsley, still somewhat disoriented from the sudden turn of events, was dragged along by the friend until she spotted her father in the crowd. "Daddy!" she called out, her voice ringing over the commotion. The man's face brightened at the sight of Qin Li. He made his way over with a warm smile and extended his hand. "I'm glad you could make it," Mr. Tang said, shaking Qin Li's hand firmly. Qin Li, taken aback by the warmth of the greeting, stood somewhat speechless. He hadn't expected such a reception. Mr. Tang didn't waste any time. "I'd like you to act as an observer at today's auction," he said, his eyes gleaming with intent. He clarified that he was seeking Qin Li's counsel, recognizing his sharp instincts for gems. Qin Li, still processing the whirlwind of events, nodded, acknowledging the task with a respectful bow. He understood now. Mr. Tang wanted his insight to help navigate the auction. From what he gathered, the event was divided into two parts: the main blind auction and a special sculpture segment. The ultimate victor would claim both. As they moved further into the main hall, Mr. Tang introduced Qin Li to a few other acquaintances, including the evaluators who would also serve as judges for the competition. The man's daughter, with a sly grin, leaned over to whisper, "If you help us rank in the top 3, my father will be very generous in expressing his gratitude." Her father chuckled, adding, "And if you can help me secure first place, I'll offer you a 10th stake in the Tang jewelry empire." The girl flashed Qin Li a mischievous smile. "And I have my own way of sweetening the deal," she teased. Qin Li, keeping his composure, assured Mr. Tang that he would exert his utmost effort and diligence. With that, they all proceeded toward the grand main hall, where the stakes were higher than he'd ever imagined. The other appraisers teased Qin Li about his youthful appearance, clearly trying to get a rise out of him. Unfazed, he responded with a smile, assuring them that age wasn't a hindrance. He casually cited his remarkable luck and skill in handling his responsibilities, deflecting their playful jabs with ease. One of the gentlemen handed Qin Li a business card, slyly inquiring about its value in millions. Laughter rippled through the group as they joked that a mere couple of thousand would be enough for someone like him. Qin Li studied the card thoughtfully, maintaining his composure, before his gaze shifted to a heap of stones nearby. Something about one stone in particular caught his eye. An event staffer approached him, noticing his focused interest. "Thinking about purchasing one of these?" she asked, her tone polite but curious. Qin Li's focus briefly shifted to the other appraisers, most of whom had already acquired sizable stones. They exuded confidence, as if victory was already within their grasp. Meanwhile, the staffer assisted, drawing his attention back. With a nod, he handed over the business card, explaining that there were ample funds loaded onto it to cover his expenses. She accepted it with a gracious smile. As more attendees approached, engaging him in lively conversation, it was evident that, despite the stakes, they viewed the event as an opportunity for camaraderie as much as competition. One participant even offered light-hearted jokes about the auction, adding to the overall lively atmosphere. Someone offered Qin Li some friendly advice, suggesting that maybe he should gracefully bow out while he could. But Qin Li stood firm. "I make my own decisions," he said confidently. With that, he proceeded to purchase the stone that had captured his interest, eager to see what lay within. The intrigue grew as Mr. Tang himself approached, asking if the participants had made their final selections. The men spoke up confidently, stating that they had chosen the finest stone this time, ensuring a place in the top 3. Mr. Tang seemed pleased, but the tension in the room was palpable. Suddenly, the air thickened as a man, accompanied by a stunning woman, strode into the scene. He was the reigning victor from the previous event, and he wasted no time mocking Mr. Tang, making it clear there was a fierce rivalry between them, with the Tang family seemingly on the losing end of this ongoing feud. Tension spiked, and a brief altercation ensued but was quickly diffused. The victor turned his attention to Qin Li, giving him a scrutinizing glance. So Mr. Tang's keen on recruiting the first guy he sees into his team. Huh, he sneered, clearly looking to provoke a reaction. Behind him, a cluster of men in sleek business attire loomed, shades covering their eyes. They had made significant purchases, clearly poised as contenders for the title. Despite a brief attempt by one of Mr. Tang's associates to smooth over the situation, the victor's presence cast a shadow of doubt. As the auction competition neared its conclusion, Mr. Tang approached Qin Li again. So he asked, his voice low and full of expectation, "What's the status of your stone?" Qin Li presented a small, unassuming pebble in a casket, eliciting laughter from Mr. Tang's team. The chuckle spread as Mr. Tang's face darkened with visible displeasure, feeling that Qin Li had squandered his investment. Meanwhile, the female presenter called for calm, unexpectedly hailing the discovery as something truly exquisite, prompting skeptical glances from the crowd. The stakes were already high, with the total value of the event climbing to around 160 million. As the evaluations commenced, Qin Li observed the reactions around him. Some appeared crestfallen, especially Cheyenne, who had spent a staggering 723 million on what seemed like a promising cut of rock. But when they unveiled it, the stone turned out to be a complete disappointment, leaving Mr. Tang's team visibly upset. The presenter's voice carried a hint of sarcasm as she remarked that Mr. Tang's performance today had been lackluster. However, she added with a glimmer of hope that there was still one stone attributed to him, meaning there was a final chance to redeem the day. With expectations dwindling, Mr. Tang watched as they began carving into Qin Li's stone. Initially, it didn't seem to stand out, but as the rock was cut deeper, something remarkable emerged, an imperial green emerald. The room was stunned by the revelation that such an unassuming stone contained something so valuable. It appeared that Qin Li's stone hadn't been a waste of money after all, much to the shock of the other evaluators, who couldn't fathom how such a small investment had outdone their massive wagers. Mr. Tang, who had been losing hope, suddenly found himself wondering if he should have placed his trust entirely in Qin Li from the start. His thoughts were interrupted as Qin Li moved toward his next discovery. Without warning, one of the men rushed forward, screaming for him to stop, but it was too late. Qin Li had already cut into his second stone. Inside was something even more extraordinary, a statuette made of rare red jasper. The crowd froze in awe as the rarity and value of the find became immediately apparent. The presenter was delighted, explaining to everyone that it was a unique piece of jasper, taking over 1,000 years to form. Even those without expertise could recognize that Qin Li had just unveiled something of immense value. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as the guests began to place their bets. Numbers skyrocketed. 900 million, then 1 billion, and even higher. One guest, watching in awe, remarked that such a discovery was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Beside him sat his elderly grandfather, coughing into a bloodied handkerchief, eyes fixed on the rare find, unable to look away. Qin Li stood calmly amid the chaos, his earlier doubts washed away by the thrill of discovery, knowing that today he had indeed emerged as the unexpected champion. The word sold echoed through the auction hall, reverberating with excitement. Mr. Tang celebrated as he successfully sold a piece of jasper for an astonishing 2 billion, earning him the title of today's champion. Qin Li and Mr. Tang stepped onto the stage, basking in the congratulations from the presenter, surrounded by a standing ovation. "Today's event is surely one for the history books," the presenter declared. Mr. Tang turned to Qin Li, bowing in gratitude. "You, my company would have faced failure," he said, genuine appreciation shining in his eyes. Qin Li felt a swell of satisfaction in having lent a helping hand. Yet he was caught off guard when Mr. Tang, wanting to express his gratitude, offered him the entire proceeds from the sale of the Jasper Nugget, a staggering 2 billion. "Wait, what?" Qin Li exclaimed, stunned by the offer. From this day forward, he was declared the most esteemed guest in their household. Mr. Tang's daughter added with a smile, her eyes sparkling. "Thanks to you, our standing has soared. and news of our deeds will spread far and wide across the provinces." Their pleasant exchange was suddenly interrupted by a group of men, shifting the focus back to Qin Li. They conveyed that the individual responsible for organizing the competition desired to meet him, extending an official invitation. Intrigued, rather than intimidated, Qin Li accepted the invitation. Before long, he found himself seated in the back of a luxurious car, contemplating the significance of the Jang family's invitation. The driver announced their arrival, and as Qin Li stepped out, he was greeted by the sight of a magnificent estate. The security measures were abundant, signaling the seriousness of the occasion. As he entered, Qin Li's keen interest in the grand decor grew. One of the attendants knocked on a door, announcing Qin Li's arrival. The door swung open to reveal the same young man who had admired Qin Li's attire at the auction. "We've been eagerly anticipating your arrival," he said warmly, ushering Qin Li inside. In the room, an elderly gentleman sat in a wheelchair, his grandson beaming with excitement. "You made quite an impression at today's competition," the young man praised. But Qin Li sensed an undercurrent of something deeper. The homeowner, still smiling, clarified, "I have a favor to ask. I'd like to know about your decision to cut into that remarkable emerald. Why did you do it? How did you know there was a jasper nugget inside?" Qin Li smiled back, relishing the moment. "The moment the stone was in my grasp, I felt there was something special about it. Sometimes you just know when to take a risk," he explained. His words hung in the air, hinting at the intuition that guided him through the day's events, a blend of instinct and experience that had led him to this moment of unexpected fortune. He sensed that the old man held more than met the eye, a depth of history and wisdom that intrigued Qin Li, prompting him to ponder what lay beneath the surface. The elderly gentleman expressed a desire to locate the jasper, suggesting that Qin Li's assistance would be invaluable. Directing his gaze toward old man Jang, Qin Li noted the flicker of curiosity in his eyes, prompting the elder to inquire, "Did you notice something peculiar?" Qin Li hesitated before responding. "I sensed an underlying issue that might not be immediately apparent." The individual acknowledged his uncertainty about guaranteeing full recovery due to the man's advanced age and the severity of his illness, but offered what assistance he could. As Qin Li gently placed his hand on the old man's wrist to take his pulse, he was surprised to feel a significant presence of negative energy deeply ingrained within him. "There's more going on here than just age," he muttered under his breath. After some time and using certain techniques he had learned, the old man began to feel a noticeable improvement, astonishing both him and his grandson. Yet Qin Li cautioned, "This relief is temporary. We need to identify the root cause of your ailment." The grandson, observing his grandfather's reluctance to go outside, recalled recent gifts they had received. "What about that jade stand we got?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Qin Li's expression shifted. "Jade can carry energy, especially if it's been disturbed, or if it came from a cemetery." He paused, observing the old man's expression shift from curiosity to alarm. "Prolonged exposure to such an item could indeed pose health risks," Qin Li explained. With a heavy sigh, the old man confessed, "I have felt the chill of the grave at night." The grandson's eyes widened, the pieces falling into place. "So the jade stand is the culprit behind my grandfather's illness?" Qin Li nodded. "I cannot guarantee a permanent solution, but I can help. However, I initially sought your expertise in stones, particularly the jasper," he said, realizing the current circumstances made that pursuit seem trivial. The family, sensing his sincerity, insisted they were indebted to him for his assistance. The homeowner assured Qin Li that he could ask for anything, and all requests would be honored. "I appreciate that," Qin Li replied. "But aiding others is my purpose. I will help you search for the jasper, but I have a single request." The young heir nodded, eager to fulfill it. Qin Li produced a photograph from his pocket, presenting it to the young man. It depicted him alongside his parents, both smiling. My parents vanished a decade ago, he explained, a trace of longing in his voice. I have a strong desire to uncover their fate and whereabouts. The Jang family heir examined the image closely, a look of determination crossing his face. I will do my utmost to help you, he promised, acknowledging the significant passage of time and the challenges that lay ahead. We will find out what happened to them. With the commitment made, Qin Li felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he was not only assisting the Zhang family, but also taking steps toward uncovering the truth about his own past. He cautioned that locating relevant information might prove challenging. Nonetheless, Qin Li accepted this with gratitude.